Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're looking at an article from LinkedIn.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, by Johan Skaneby.
Okay.
And the title's pretty interesting. It's called When Brands Meet Values, a reflection on global origin markings in a changing world. Now, just for context, Johan is a consultant and solution architect.
Right.
Who focuses on media services and AI, so it's definitely interesting
Yeah.
to see what he has to say about brands through that particular lens.
For sure. For sure.
So one of the things that really struck me right at the beginning of the article is his observation about how people on LinkedIn seem to be engaging more.
Right.
Not just with their careers, but with, how companies and countries are kind of acting on the global stage. Have you noticed this too?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's definitely something that's more prevalent now. I think it maybe reflects a growing awareness of just how interconnected everything is. You know, like our choices here can have ripple effects on the other side of the world.
Exactly. And I think it also ties into that whole idea of like voting with your wallet.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, consumers are realizing that their purchases can actually have, ethical and even political implications.
For sure. I mean, every purchase is kind of a statement in a way.
Exactly.
About what you value and what you support.
So then Skaneby kind of jumps into this question of, have origin labels like made in the USA or made in China.
Interesting.
Have they kind of changed their value over time?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I remember, growing up, made in the USA was like this mark of quality. It meant something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now I feel like for some consumers, it might actually carry different connotations,
It's complicated, right? Because you have the quality aspect.
Yeah.
But then you also have like the political dimension, and how people feel about American foreign policy or, labor practices.
Right, exactly. And then he talks about made in China.
Right.
There's a whole other can of worms,
For sure.
Because it's kind of grappling with both those quality perceptions.
Right.
And then you have the whole, geopolitical aspect as well.
And the historical baggage too, right? Like how made in China is now kind of like a joke sometimes.
Yeah.
On like Temu or whatever. But it's almost like people used to joke about made in Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly.
In the same way, like decades ago.
Yeah. It's so interesting how those perceptions kind of shift over time.
It is, and it makes you wonder, like, what really shapes those perceptions?
Yeah.
Is it fair? Is it based on, actual experience?
Right.
Or is it just kind of like stereotypes?
Right. And then he goes on to say that, labels like made in Sweden or made in the EU might actually carry a different kind of value now.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, he doesn't really go into detail, but I wonder if it has something to do with, maybe perceptions of those countries or those regions as being more aligned with certain values like sustainability or
maybe like social responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like higher labor standards.
Yeah. And he even suggests that these origin labels could actually influence trade balances.
Really?
Like if consumers start prioritizing products from certain countries, it could actually have an impact on trade.
So you're saying like it could actually shift the balance of power?
Well, that's what he's suggesting.
Interesting.
He uses the example of Tesla sales dropping like 45% in January.
Oh, wow.
As a potential sign of, consumer power in action.
Yeah, but do you think that's really what's going on? Like, I mean, there could be so many other factors affecting car sales,
Exactly.
The economy or, competition.
Right, or like people just waiting for the Cybertruck or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is it really about origin or is it about other things?
I think it's definitely more complex than he's making it out to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure I'm buying it.
I think I agree with you there. So we're kind of questioning his logic here.
A little bit, yeah.
But, it is interesting to think about.
For sure.
Like how much power consumers actually have to influence these global trade dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question.
Yeah,
for sure. I don't think there's an easy answer.
Absolutely not. And it's something that we definitely need to explore further.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, we're off to a good start here.
Absolutely.
Already kind of poking holes in some of his arguments.
Well, we have to be critical.
Yeah.
Right? That's our job.
Exactly.
We can't just take things at face value. We have to dig deeper.
Absolutely.
And ask the tough questions.
I like it.
Right.
Okay. So let's keep going, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So next up, he talks about how the perception of the European defense industry has kind of shifted.
Oh, interesting.
Now it's gone from being seen as kind of negative to being associated with like defending peace, and democracy.
Wow, that's a big shift.
It's a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
And he attributes this to the war in Ukraine and the growing need for European countries to kind of step up and defend themselves. But I'm not sure it's that simple.
Right. I mean, perceptions of the defense industry has always been kind of complicated.
For sure.
Right. It's not like they suddenly became the good guys overnight.
Exactly. And I think this is where we need to be careful about, conflating brand image with actual action.
Yeah, you're right.
Just because something is perceived positively doesn't mean it's actually operating ethically.
Absolutely. We have to look beyond the PR and the marketing.
For sure.
What are they actually doing?
Right. Are they investing in sustainable technologies?
Yeah.
Are they prioritizing human rights in their operations?
Right. Are they transparent about their lobbying efforts?
Exactly. Yeah. All these things are important to consider, regardless of how an industry or company presents itself.
Right. Image versus reality.
Exactly.
That's key.
It's a key distinction and something that Skaneby doesn't really address.
Yeah, he kind of glosses over that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
So let's move on to his next point.
Okay.
Which is this idea that brands are becoming more than just promises of quality.
Okay.
They're increasingly about values and political stances.
Interesting.
He specifically mentions companies like Meta, Amazon, Google, Spotify.
Big names.
Huge names, right?
Yeah.
And he says that they need to be thinking about their brands in the long term. Almost like they have like a moral obligation to take a stance on global issues.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit wary of that idea as well.
Like who gets to decide what the right values are?
Exactly. And what happens when those values clash with profit margins or shareholder interests?
Right.
It seems like he's setting up this false dichotomy.
Yeah.
Like companies have to choose between profits and principles.
And it ignores the potential for those values to be like manipulated or exploited, for marketing purposes.
Values washing all over again.
Exactly. It's like values washing on steroids.
Oh my gosh, right.
Like they can use their platforms to push certain agendas.
Right.
Or silence dissenting voices.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, so we need to be really careful about, corporations wielding too much power.
Absolutely.
In this realm of values and ethics.
We need more accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it seems like Skaneby is placing a lot of faith in the power of the market to regulate itself.
Right.
But history has shown us that's not always effective.
Not always.
We need strong regulations, independent oversight
for sure,
to make sure that companies are actually living up
to
their ethical claims.
Absolutely.
So it's a complex issue for sure.
It is.
And I think we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's a lot more to unpack.
There is a lot more to unpack.
So much more to say.
But maybe we can take a quick break.
Okay.
And then come back and delve a little deeper.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so picking up where we left off, Skaneby makes this interesting point about how individual consumer choices can have a ripple effect on, global companies.
Yeah. I'm not totally convinced by that argument.
Right, me neither. I mean, it's a nice thought.
Yeah.
But in reality, I think there are so many other factors at play.
Absolutely, like systemic issues.
Yeah.
Government policies.
Right.
Global trade agreements.
It's a very complex system.
Way more complex than just individual people deciding what to buy.
Right. And he kind of glosses over all of that.
Yeah, it's like he's oversimplifying things.
Totally. And I think this kind of ties into a broader point.
Okay.
About the need for a more critical approach to these issues.
I agree. Like, we can't just accept these grand pronouncements about consumer power or corporate responsibility at face value.
We have to dig deeper.
Exactly. We need to ask tough questions.
Yeah.
And be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
I love that. So where do we go from here?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that there's no easy fix.
Right.
There's no magic bullet.
No silver bullet.
Exactly. It's about ongoing engagement, education, and a willingness to hold both ourselves and those in power accountable.
I think that's a really important point. It's not just about blaming corporations or putting all the responsibility on consumers.
It's a shared responsibility.
It is.
We all have a role to play.
And maybe it's also about being more discerning about the information we consume.
Oh, absolutely. Like social media algorithms can create these echo chambers where we're only exposed to viewpoints that confirm our existing beliefs.
Which is dangerous.
It is. So we need to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Engage with people who hold different views.
Exactly. Be open to changing our minds.
I think that's so crucial in today's world.
It's so easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles.
Totally. And then we just end up talking to people who already agree with us.
And that doesn't help anyone.
No, does it just reinforces our biases?
Exactly. So we need to break out of those bubbles.
I agree. And maybe it's also about being more realistic about the limits of individual action.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a really important point.
Like our choices do matter.
Yes.
But we can't place all the burden of change on consumers.
Right. We need systemic solutions.
Yeah.
Government regulations, collective action.
It's a multifaceted issue.
Absolutely.
That requires a more holistic approach.
It's about understanding the interconnectedness
Yes.
of these problems and working together.
That's such a powerful idea.
I think so too. It's not about individual heroes.
Right.
It's about collective effort.
It's about all of us working together
Exactly.
to create a better future.
And a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today.
Wow, that went by fast.
It did. We covered a lot of ground.
We did. It was a really stimulating conversation.
It was. I always enjoy our deep dives.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's great to have these thought-provoking discussions.
And to really delve into these complex issues.
Absolutely. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it too.
I hope so too. And I hope it inspired them to think critically about the role of brands and values in our world.
That's the goal.
It is. Thanks for joining me today. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, it does feel like he leaves us hanging a bit.
Right. Like, what are we supposed to do with all this?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how much power do we really have as consumers?
Is it even worth trying to vote with our wallets?
Right. Like, are we just kidding ourselves?
And what about those systemic issues?
Yeah, he barely scratches the surface there.
Right. It's like he acknowledges the complexity, but then he just kind of throws up his hands.
Like, oh, well, it's too big a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a bit of a cop-out.
I agree. We need more than just vague pronouncements.
Right. We need concrete solutions.
Or at least some frameworks for thinking about these issues.
Absolutely. Like, how do we balance individual action
Right.
with systemic change?
How do we hold corporations accountable?
And how do we navigate this increasingly complex landscape of brands and values?
It's a lot to grapple with.
It is, but I think it's important to have these conversations.
Oh, for sure.
Even if they're messy and uncomfortable.
Yeah, can't just shy away from the hard questions.
Right, we need to keep pushing for a better world.
Even if we don't have all the answers?
Exactly, it's about the journey, not the destination.
I like that. So maybe that's a good takeaway for our listeners.
Okay.
You know, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep pushing for change.
Yes, absolutely. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
And don't underestimate your own power.
Even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. So get out there and make your voice heard.
I love it. On that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Wow, time flies when you're having fun.
It really does. It's been a fascinating conversation.
As always.
Thanks for joining me.
It was my pleasure, and thanks to all our listeners out there.
Yes, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Until then, keep thinking critically.